All right, so we have our panel here and some questions that we will throw to them. And the first one is, by nature, blockchains serve best as an immutable ledger. They're not currently scalable or meant for computing. So it begs the question, do we even need blockchain? What would be your response to that?
Yeah, so I guess I'll go first. So from my experience, I know that blockchain technology is an extremely useful tool. Not only that, but it is actually saving companies valuable time and, most importantly, money. So my experience at AlphaPoint, where we're working to digitize assets, whether they be commodities, currencies, real estate, just to name a few, looking to digitize those to the blockchain. We're seeing firsthand that it's actually saving companies a lot of time and a lot of money, and helping reduce the costs of the initial launch of these digital assets, along with the sale on the secondary markets as well. So that's from my experience. So I would say yes, that we in fact do need blockchain technology.
I think this question kind of brings to mind when Thomas Edison was asked the question, what do you think is the scale or the scope for computers back in 1943? And he answered, maybe 5. So, and today when we look at the penetration of computers is more than 50% of the world population. I think blockchain kind of falls in a similar technology where, like any new technology or product, it has to go through a product life cycle. And it eventually will be there where it will become a part of everyone in this room.
Yeah, I mean, historically, we've always needed some way to store information. And fundamentally, that's what blockchain is. Humanity is about constantly kind of improving. You know, they always say history repeats itself. That's what we're doing right now. It's just, you know, we're at this point where we can improve upon it and ensure that something is secure for everyone, not for those who hold power. So do we need a better form of what we've been doing for thousands of years? Yeah. Can we do it? Yeah. Should we do it? Yes.
Actually, that's exactly the reason why I think we need it too. You know, for better security. I mean, we could keep doing what we're doing now, but with all of the hacking and the breaches, that doesn't seem like a solution that we can really live with. And the centralization of power, you know, it is dangerous. So, you know, we have to start conditioning people to feel the power, you know, that they do have the power within themselves. And I think that the technology, the computing power will catch up and, you know, eventually transform the way we transact. Okay, so seeing that blockchain is going to be a thing, what are some of the industries that you can see blockchain disrupting within the next 5 years?
Yeah, so I would say that not even within the next 5 years, but we're actually currently going through a period of disruption where we're seeing companies in a plethora of industries, insurance, fintech, know your customer, and anti-money laundering, just to name a few. It's kind of hard to say what the next 5 years would hold, but I would say the most important thing that we should look into now is scalability of blockchain technology. I think that as long as this technology becomes scalable in each industry, that will just really prove which industries may take a little longer than others to kind of pick up the pace.
I think, Lisa, we were kind of like talking about that right before this panel was health and health technology. So I represent Pulse Point, which is a leading health technology company. And one of the things we consciously decided or are thinking of is staying ahead and knowing that blockchain is something that is potentially going to impact healthcare and health marketing and pretty much any way that a health brand is touching or connecting with a health user, considering all the regulations, HIPAA compliance that one has to work with. So knowing who's the user, what kind of data has been shared about that user and validated that information through the entire process is very important for any health marketer out there. So I would say industries that will be disrupted with blockchain would be healthcare, would be health technology, and health marketing in general.
Yeah, it's just, sorry, and I just want to kind of back that up because I feel like blockchain is kind of billed as this transformative technology, which I think we believe it will be. And if there's anything that needs transforming, I think it's the healthcare system in this country.
Yeah.
So I think that it holds so much potential for disruption. It's a highly regulated industry, but I think we'll find solutions to work with that. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Daniel said, scaling is kind of, I feel like we're at this bubble right now where it's like we're getting very close to these layer 2 solutions. We're getting close to sharding. We're getting close to plasma. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's, oops, not speaking to the mic. I don't know what's going to happen with where it's going to go. I'm excited for healthcare. I'm also excited for art. I think there's, shipping art internationally, there's a lot of different paperwork that needs to go into that. So many different people need to sign off on this. And my girlfriend actually works at a shipping, she works for she handles shipping logistics for a company. She's and there's always like, oh man, if only we could just if we could just kind of implement this kind of automated ledger where we know what's happening, it would make this process so much faster and it would benefit a lot of people in the industry. Of course, it's not as beneficial to the people as healthcare, but it's definitely something I'm really curious to see how that'll work out.
It's beneficial in a different way. Actually, one of the other industries that, and Daniel, you're working in it now. I'd love to see, the real estate industry, the mortgage industry actually be disrupted. Anybody who's bought a house knows what a laborious, kind of opaque process it is. And if we can use blockchain to open up and facilitate that process, I think that would be a great way to disrupt.
Yeah. I think also something I've been seeing recently is electricity grouping, where people will batch purchase electricity, and I think that's another really, really interesting way that kind of will bring the power of distributed ledger, and ultimately putting more of the power of what electricity you're getting, and how you're managing that a lot easier. Yeah. That's something we're excited for as well.
And even in the public sector, can you imagine where your tax dollars are going? It's kind of that would be kind of an interesting way to disrupt. Okay, well, and talking a lot about scalability. So the next topic is, in your sector of experience, what are some of the pros and cons of private blockchain versus public blockchain?
Yeah, so public blockchains provide I would say up first, a great view into transparency, along with, in my industry, a pool of liquidity, the ability to make global payments, and the ability to manage your own wealth globally, whether it's storage or transfer of wealth. Same goes for private blockchains, but with the added benefit of deciding who gets that transparency, along with who gets to participate and what parties get to be involved within that private blockchain. Some of the cons, as we had mentioned, for public blockchains would be, again, scalability. Getting it to a point where it can be used in a timely fashion globally is huge. And then I would say for private blockchains, the centralization of private blockchains, there are solutions being worked out for both of these public and private blockchains, whether the scalability and the centralization, but that would probably be one of the cons.
So at Pulse Point, we always looking at emerging technologies, and at this point, we're looking at both the pros and cons of private versus open. And to Daniel's point, there isn't a perfect solution. And I think every application or every use has to be seen on what your business case is, what problem you're trying to solve. Keeping those parameters in mind, an entity or an organization has to make a decision whether they want to go private or public. But I think that's a decision that an entity or an organization has to make for themselves. But neither of them are perfect. I hope soon we will get there, but for now, it has to be at the discretion.
So, Veena, are you talking? So you're ad tech, but also healthcare. So blockchain, private versus public. So the applications of that on the ad tech side. So what are kind of the decision-making processes in that?
Sure. So I would say when it comes to ad tech, some of the scenarios that we're looking at is validating an impression, whether an impression was actually served or whether an ad was actually served. When you're thinking about that, and when you're thinking about the use case there, because you know that there are multiple entities involved in that transaction, a better I would say a better consensus will go towards an open blockchain or a public blockchain. However, when you're talking about health technology, and when you know that you have limitations on who has access to that data, in that case, we are leaning more towards a closed or rather a private blockchain.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the use cases for both right now. I get it in the sense that there's not a lot of options, right? I mean, you essentially have to manage your own end-to-end encryption if you want to have something private managed on a public blockchain. I get it from I think like Veena's saying, it kind of really depends on your business needs. If you're managing an internal ledger, if you're managing internal accounts, and you want that to be completely separate from the rest of the ecosystem, the rest of the world, yeah, of course, private blockchain, I get it. It goes at the cost of centralization of power, and at the benefit of speed, most likely. I think this is going to change a little bit as these kind of new scaling solutions come out, and I think there'll be less of a need for private blockchains because we'll be able to manage the speed on the public blockchains. We'll be able to manage the security on the public blockchains. And I think there's a lot of middle ground between this. With Plasma, for example, we can generate a ton of there's a new blockchain generated for every transaction needed to speed up the transaction. So say, I need to execute 100 of these transactions for my healthcare industry, generates all these side transactions, and then it brings back the final balance of whatever that is to the public blockchain. I think these kind of middle ground solutions as well will kind of benefit companies that need some sort of both speedier and more secure blockchain solution.
Yeah, no, and there's definitely a debate to going into that. And for healthcare, I think in the experimentation phase right now, it's more on the private side. It is more scalable, and with regulation, I think it's easier. And also for medical records and sharing medical records. I mean, how fragmented it is and kind of frustrating, and how much waste there is in the system because those records are not shared. So that kind of lends itself to private. But then there's also the benefit of a public blockchain for healthcare, which is putting private genetic sequencing online. So potentially, researchers can actually access that and innovate on new drugs and new, discoveries. And in fact, another way to possibly use that is you can own your own health data and you can sell your own health data. That might be kind of a radical thing to think about, but if you think about how expensive healthcare is in the country, that may not be a bad way to work the system. So. But yeah, public versus it's still being everything in blockchain is still being explored.
In fact, to your point, Lisa, like when you think about clinical trials, I think one application that you can think of blockchain is in clinical trials. You would possibly know that just how difficult it is to get the right people for clinical trials. Once those match those specific parameters that a drug manufacturer is looking to create a solution for. So I think when people own their own data, I think they would be more receptive and more proactive to be able to make a change and do something about it.
Yeah, as long as they feel that power.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then you get back to the scalability issue, which is there's so much data. I think, a genetic sequencing I read is 3 gigs, like for one person. So, so it eventually it will get to that point. Again, I think it'll catch up. But we have a ways to go. Okay, so moving on to kind of the crypto side of the world. So there's a venture capitalist, Tim Draper, who's very bullish on crypto. And he says that cash will soon be as passe as paying for a coffee with coins. Do you think that will happen? When do you think that will happen?
Yes, so I was actually walking through Grand Central the other day, and I stopped by a wine store, and there was a sign on the wall that said now accepting Litecoin, which I thought was pretty interesting. And if you've been tracking the market, you can now buy more wine as of today. So I think that there's a huge push to make it more accessible as a global payment solution. We're not quite there yet, but I've seen a lot of really interesting companies kind of coming out of the woodworks, giving people the ability to make payments in store, whether it's a card that converts the funds into usable fiat dollars, or a payment provider that allows you the access to make purchases online. So I think that there's a lot of progress in this space. I think that we just have a lot of ways to go. But I'm interested to see what other companies come up with and how we can make this more of a stable global payment solution as well. So,
I saw a poke place actually down in the village. Yep, is accepting Ethereum. So,
I guess my answer to that would be, isn't that happening already? Like, both your examples kind of like, refer to that's happening already. If I look at my wallet, I barely have any cash. If I think about the top apps on my phone, it's Uber, it's Airbnb, Venmos. So I feel like all of this is kind of making cash passe. Again, there's an inception. It will eventually happen. When? I'm not sure, but I don't think we're too far.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you definitely, Vina, and you, Daniel, as well. I think we're close. I don't know how close. I mean, I think it's people always want something tangible, so I'm so sure there will always be some sort of physical interface that we'll need. I don't know if people will just come in and start typing in addresses or maybe scanning their eyes. I hope not. But but I do think we're, as you noted, we are starting to, I already barely carry my wallet around. I need my phone. I can just RFID it. If I want to transfer funds to my bank account, I'm using a different payment app. I can't remember the last time I took out cash at the bank. So we're really not, we already kind of made the step from moving away from fiat. It's really just about now translating that to what we're transferring, the currency we're transferring.
Mm-hmm. And kind of a related question, which is the emergence of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And when do you kind of see that happening or taking hold?
I think it really depends on, it really depends on the companies. I think it will, that's tough to say. You're asking a company to essentially completely redefine its hierarchical, or its setup, rather. I can't say when that'll happen. I think it will really be up to when new companies that are implementing DAOs really start to take over, that other people will start to notice and probably implement that. I think it'll be hard to transfer, migrate an existing company to a DAO, or it's hard to sell.
Yeah, I would have to agree that it would. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. That it would have to be a natively a company that is looking to natively kind of go with the DAO solution over a company that already has processes and procedures in place that would make it a little more complex to kind of just switch over. So I would agree.
Yeah, like I kind of think about the latest Microsoft suite. I think it was 8, maybe, or and we had such a hard time like making everyone like download it and making sure like all the systems and we're following the same across the organization. So, kind of taking that parallel, I don't think it's. I think, yeah, to Daniel's point, it has to be a natively created.
That will force the shift. Yeah. Okay, so I guess this all kind of culminates in the big question of, why do you think that there are still trust issues with adopting blockchain universally?
Yeah, I think it's more along the lines of fear. I think people act off of fear, but I think it's more fear that could be accredited to the lack of proper education around what blockchain technology is really attempting to do. And as mentioned up here before, it's attempting to give individuals the power back and to give it back to the everyday working man. It's looking to get everybody more transparency, being able to manage their own information and their own data, along with being able to manage their own storage and, again, transfer of wealth. So I think if people look at it in that way and try to educate themselves on the technology, that they will be a lot less afraid of this change than they currently may be.
Totally, I completely agree with Daniel here. I think education is the biggest piece. So when you think about any new innovation, like when you think about any innovation, right? When you think about penicillin, when you think about radioactivity, when you think about computers, there was a lot of mistrust, or there was a lot of concerns around it. So I think that's natural. We are humans. We will always mistrust anything that's new. And I think that's why the piece of education plays such a key part. Education as well as access. I feel like when more and more individuals have access to this technology, the fears will go away.
Yeah, so take the product school blockchain class.
Yes, definitely.
Free plug.
Yeah, I have to agree. It's really just the lack of knowledge. Even myself, if you want to start learning how to develop for the blockchain, there's really, you kind of have to start piecing these together, these different answers from, Stack Overflow and all these random different websites. And so if the documentation for the software itself isn't that great, how can you expect people to, and it's not, sorry, I don't want to diss on the software. It's great, it's fantastic, and they've done a lot of work on it. It's all open source. But at the same time, if there's this much lack of knowledge for people developing, it's going to take a while for that knowledge to trickle down. And I think, if we can have some more ways to, expose this to the public, I think people will have a lot easier of a time. Technology won't stop either way. It's just a matter of when we get on board.
Yeah. And kind of to that point, or actually to Veena and to your point, so it's very new, and it's changing, really rapidly. And I think, people say, and I think it's true, that blockchain is kind of where it is today is where we were back in the mid-90s with the internet. But the internet was much more accessible. Had pictures and, and sounds sometimes. So it was very accessible and relatable, where blockchain is really, it's technical. And I think a lot of people just don't, there's a block. No pun intended, there's a block there. So I think maybe we have to find a way to make it more user-friendly. And maybe that's through dApps and trying to do it that way.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something. The company I'm working at, Thunder, I'm developing dApps right now, and that's kind of our whole goal. Is like, you want to make that transition as seamless as possible, and it's a little hard to do that. You have to have an extension maybe or a different browser, and it's really about minimizing this user friction in order to create an experience that's, it's like the internet but a little bit different. So I think it's on myself, it's on us as developers and, companies that are building these products to really kind of make it as easy as possible.
Yeah. And then we kind of had a philosophical conversation about this earlier, because it is a whole shift from centralized authority to decentralized, and basically the power is in your hands. So, you have to be comfortable with the fact that you're holding your keys, literally. You have to protect your keys and your information. So there may be a general lack of discomfort with that as well, because it's a big paradigm shift in the way we manage. So those are all the questions I had for the panel. Are there any other thoughts or ideas about where you think blockchain will go next?
I guess I'll jump in real quick. I think the identity management is probably something I kind of remembered. I forgot until after that question. But identity management is a really, really interesting area because I think it's one of these. It's service that will need to kind of influence all of the other industries being built around blockchain. Having a secure way to manage those keys. We need to create. We have the wallet, but wallets haven't looked the same for thousands of years. I mean, we're a physical wallet, and much in the same way, we'll need a new way to manage our identity in a way that makes people feel comfortable.
Yeah.
I'm definitely excited for that.
Yeah, that's going to be great.
I kind of want to expand on, we talked about how the internet was more user-friendly, but I also, it kind of brings to my mind the picture of when I was like a 13-year-old, my dad gave me like this Nokia phone that almost looked like a brick. And the only thing you could do was pretty much call. Now when you look at your phones, I think calling is like the least amount of thing that you do on a phone, right? Like that's the last thing you do on a phone. So I think, to Julian's point that as more and more dApps evolve and get developed, I think it's just going to become more user-friendly. Mm. There's no reason why not to.
Yeah, and just like the internet boom, as you said in the 90s, gave the working class man the ability to purchase shares in companies with the stock market and the launch of the different trading desks. Digitizing of assets is what's of interest to myself, and giving everybody the ability to potentially get in on markets that you were not able to get in on prior, whether it be the amount of capital needed, or just kind of the privacy around those markets. So I think that's a pretty big step in the right direction to give everybody the chance to grow. So.
Yep, democratization, privacy, security. Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.